Hi, everybody. Good evening. It is Monday, April 21st, 2025. I'm Nate Eaton coming to you live from Phoenix. I'm actually in Chandler tonight, moved to Chandler, and hope you all had a wonderful Easter weekend. What a day today in Lori Vallow Daybell's trial. We are nearing the end, and we are on Verdict Watch. Verdict Watch 2025. When will we get the verdict? We will see. And I'd love to know your thoughts, your predictions on when the jury will bring back a verdict and what you think that verdict will be. We're going to break down everything that happened today. We're starting a minute early. Look at that. I better fill the time for 1 minute. Normally I'm late. I'm like pushing right up until the deadline, but here we are. And I just want to say, for those of you watching on Meetin' the Eatons, that's our family YouTube channel. Welcome to you. Thank you for watching. Erica is on there on the comments tonight, chatting. So if you're on Meetin' the Eatons, thank you. And if you're on East Idaho News, Peggy is collecting your questions, your comments, your thoughts, and please let us know where you're watching from. We will have that for you little bit later on in the program as far as some of your shout outs. But why don't we go ahead and get started? Back after the weekend, we started today. Well, let me tell you a little bit about last night. I got in really late into Phoenix. I got in around 12:30, and I drove to the hotel, and I stayed at a hotel right across from the courthouse. There's a residence inn that's right there, and last night I decided to go for a walk just to see if anybody was at the courthouse, because do you remember with Lori Vallow's sentencing in Idaho, people camped out on the lawn. We got there the night before. It was a Sunday night. I got there around 2 in the afternoon. People were already there lining up to camp out. I paid a kid to wait in line for me while I went to a hotel and slept. Thank you, Bridger, for that, by the way. And we ended up, I just wanted to be sure no one was camped out at the courthouse. This was the picture at midnight last night, 12 o'clock. I went on a little walk and nobody was there camped out. Went back to the hotel, was on the 19th floor, looked out my window when I woke up this morning at 5. Can you see those people? There's about 6 of them. And I'm like, oh, great, they're starting to line up. Well, there's 15 media seats and there's 40 or so public seats, and you don't want to miss the verdict. And I didn't want to miss today with closing arguments. So I'm like, okay, I better get down. Then I went and got out of the shower, and the line had grown a little bit, and then it grew a lot. So you can see, I'll show you. The media group are up here. The public group is here, and then there's TV stations doing live shots down here. Here is the door. So I'm like, I better get down there. And so I went down, and I ended up getting there around 6:30. I talked about it this morning on my live on my way down that anyway, I got there at 6:30 and then waited. We did a lot of waiting today. The courthouse opened at 7:30. We got upstairs in our seats outside in the waiting area, and it was full. There were a lot of people there. I would say this was probably the busiest day we've had so far, or at least maybe there was 1 or 2 days the first week of the trial, but there were a lot of people here. A lot of people from Idaho, a lot of people from Utah, people that drove in, flew in, and I'll show some pictures in a little bit later on of many of you with your shirts on. Shout out to my old college classmate, Karen, who ended up becoming a professor after she graduated. She came from Idaho, and she just started following this case like 2 or 3 weeks ago. She had heard about it, but wasn't really into it, and then had a friend that's like, you need to go watch. And so she's binge watched everything the past 2 weeks. And she really wanted to come and see what it was like to be in there. And so she came to the courthouse today and got to listen for the first time and see what it was all about, and share her thoughts about. She shared her thoughts with me. Coming up tonight, we're going to have Sheriff Ron Ball. Recorded a quick interview with him. He came from Rexburg today to be in the courtroom. Also, a woman who was in the same LDS congregation, the same ward as Lori and Charles and JJ and Tylee. She came today and saw Lori in face to face for the first time. I grabbed a quick interview with her, so I'll play that for you soon. The day started once we got into the courtroom. The jury got there at 11. The judge just wanted to make sure if there were any last minute things. Lori had an issue with the exhibit that the prosecution admitted, the exhibit of her interview with police. You remember the prosecution did not play the entire thing. They just played snippets. but they admitted most of it. What they didn't admit as part of their exhibit was everything that was hearsay. So everything Lori repeating what Tylee said or what Alex said, they had to cut all that out. They admitted the rest of the interview, but Lori was confused or just had questions about she wanted the entire thing admitted. She wanted the jury to listen to the entire thing. Well, the judge told her, why didn't basically you this could have come up on cross-examination with the detective. It's a little late to be bringing this up now when you're about to rest and the jury is about to take the case. Here's a little bit of the back and forth with her and the judge and Trina K kind of explaining what was admitted as evidence.
So it came to my attention this weekend that the exhibit number 286 that the state put into evidence that Detective Inkland testified to was the full interview is only about 21 minutes long, and the actual interview is about 55 minutes long.
Remind me, what's 286? Is whose interview?
It's my interview, I guess, with Detective Inkland.
I think that's been redacted because the full interview wouldn't be admitted into evidence for the jury to review. Is that correct?
Correct.
All right.
So is it just the snippets that were played all together?
It should just be the parts that were played in court. Is that correct?
Yes, I mean, they're all connected. But
All right.
the state redacted out the beginning, the end discussions of Tylee. That would be hearsay or not.
Right. So did you have a question about that?
Yes. So is it just the snippets all put together, or is it the interview for the first 21 minutes?
I think it's just the snippets that were played in court that are put together as one exhibit.
There's connectors between all of it, but it does not include any of the beginning or the end of the interview.
Right, portions have been redacted out.
Yes,
But it's just more or less what was played in during testimony.
correct.
Does that answer your question?
Kind of, but Detective Inkland testified that it was the full interview. So what does that mean if she testified that it was the full interview?
I don't know. It's something you could have cross-examined her on, but now it's probably too late. If you wanted clarification on that. But the jury is going to know it's redacted, and they get the redacted exhibits instruction as part of the instructions. So either side can point that out to the jury that it's redacted.
So does that make sense? She was confused about the whole thing being played versus the redacted parts versus what was played in court. It can be a little confusing whether her whole thing was admitted, but they couldn't admit the whole thing because there was hearsay in there. So they took out all the hearsay, and then whatever was left, they took clips of that. But that whole thing after the redaction, the jury can listen to. And we'll get to in a moment, Lori encouraging them to listen to her entire interview, to hear what she had to say that day, and to judge her appearance and how she was acting on that day. After that, the jury came in and the judge read a lot of instructions for like 40 minutes. Pages and pages of instructions. The jurors followed along. I'm not going to go through any of that. I did tweet about it and posted updates about it as we went, but that's kind of what that was his instruction to the jury. And then we broke for lunch. And then after lunch, Trina K had her closing argument. Here is how much time was spent. We went back, we calculated, rough estimate within a minute or two. Trina K's closing argument was 1 hour and 40 minutes. Lori Vallow Daybell's was 16 minutes. Trina K then had a rebuttal for 8 minutes. So all in all, Trina K spoke for 1 hour 48. Lori spoke for 16. There was a PowerPoint presentation that Trina K presented, and I'm going to be honest, it was so hard to hear her in that courtroom. And I gotta tell you, I have spoken with public speaking classes before, and the number one thing is if they can't hear you, they're not going to get your message. Now, I assume the jurors heard her. I hope they heard her, and on the video you can hear much clearer. In the courtroom, and I know we're not the target audience here, but it was very hard to hear her. Lori went up and spoke in the mic, and on the rebuttal, you could hear Trina K. So I apologize to those of you that say you can't hear. That is one thing in the Idaho trials. Judge Boyce was consistently saying, turn your mics on, talk into the microphone. So it was nice to go back and listen after the fact, but I still had to up the volume. Anyway, that's a side note here. Lori Vallow watched on as Trina K gave her closing statement, and she took notes. Lori Vallow, Daybell took notes. And Trina K made several points throughout her closing arguments. She talked about Chad. She talked about money. She talked about the insurance. She talked about the bat. She went through, honestly, witness by witness, and not every single one, but basically said her friend testified of this, about being like Nephi, of not having to repent, of being in a celestial state or transforming into a celestial state. She really kind of took the whole case and put it in this package that was a minute or an hour 40. Here's how she began her closing argument.
July 18th of 2019, just 7 days after this defendant and her co-conspirator, Alex Cox, shot and killed Charles. This defendant texted her soon-to-be next husband, Chad Daybell, about Charles's life insurance policy. Her words tell us that she was involved in this killing. Her actions and her words of texting Chad Daybell tell us the motives behind this murder: Chad and money. The morning of that 18th of July, Lori Vallow texted Chad and said, quote, "I just got the letter from the insurance company saying that I am not the beneficiary. It's a spear through my heart. Who do you think he changed it to?" Later that day, after she spoke with the life insurance company, he sent Chad another text. Quote, "So I talked to the insurance company. He changed it in March. Probably it was Ned before we got rid of him." Lori Vallow's words 7 days after Charles was shot and killed tells us that we was her and Alex killing Charles. Why? For that money. But Lori Vallow's plan to kill Charles wasn't just known by her lover, Chad Daybell, and her accomplice and co-conspirator, Alex Cox. It was also known by her brother, Adam. Adam told us that he knew about Lori's beliefs. He knew what she had been saying about Charles's concerns for himself. And he told us that he knew about this plan for an intervention, to talk to a stakeholder. That morning of July 11th, when Charles arrived at Lori's house, as she knew he would, he texted Adam and said, "Al is here." Adam texted back, "They are planning something."
Trina K went on to lay out the timeline and presented the timeline for the jurors to see once again several parts of the timeline, from starting a few days before the shooting up until the day of the shooting. She talked about Lori leaving to go to Walgreens. Many of you have emailed me and messaged me and talked about the fact that Lori was wearing shoes when she walked in that Walgreens, yet she told the jurors earlier on that she needed to stop and get shoes because she didn't have any because her feet were hot. The prosecution pointed that out in the closing arguments. The prosecution pointed out that they didn't call 911 for 47 minutes as Charles lay on the floor. The prosecution pointed out that Alex was needed to stand by his sister and be like Nephi. We'll play that clip in just a minute. And the prosecution pointed out the bat, that there was no damage to the bat, that not one mirror in that house was broken. And you would have thought if Alex and Charles were fighting and Charles was in a rage, that bat would have broken mirrors, that there would have been more than a 1-inch cut on the back of Alex's head. The prosecution went through it all, repeated several times several of the key points, talked about the affair that Lori was having with Chad. Here's part of it.
So let's talk about Chad, the affair with Chad Daybell. We know that She knew him as far back as November of 2018 when he came to Arizona and stayed at Lori's house. You were told by Detective Duncan that there were recordings on her Lori for Style iCloud account of Chad Daybell here in Arizona for that Preparing the People conference. You also heard that in the Lolly time, the later account that was created later, that in March of 2019, there were screenshots of flights to Idaho and back to Arizona with both Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell. This is during that time when she disappeared and Charles was taking care of JJ, and she's off flying to Hawaii and Idaho, living the good life with her soon-to-be husband. And then, of course, we know that come November 5th, she actually marries Chad Daybell. That KK Walker email address, this was that June 29th big change. What do we know? That on April 21st, she created that account. She used her own phone number in creating it. And then she sent messages to Chad Daybell, brother Daybell. You have that exhibit. She pretends to be Karen Walker and invites him to Houston, because that's where she is at that time. She offers to use Charles's money to fly him out there, and that he can stay at the house with her and her husband. In June of 2019, we see that Lori again uses that same account, but this time she pretends to be Charles and invites Chad out to Arizona to help him with a book. And again, in Exhibit 289, you have those letters. Charles finds those, and he lets everyone know he did. And he confronts Tammy, lets her know. Confronts Chad, lets him know. And he certainly lets the defendant know that he knows. And now the jig is up.
Okay, think about this. The jury, I'm sure, is dying to know, where's Tammy? He confronted Tammy about this affair. What happened to her? Where's Chad Daybell? We heard all about Chad. Why isn't he being charged? And maybe they're thinking, oh, he's being tried for another case. They don't know he's sitting on death row in Idaho. Where's Tylee? We've heard a lot about Tylee. Tylee was never called as a witness. Tylee was in the house. She was a teenager. Surely they would have called her as a witness to talk about what happened. This is what I would be thinking if I was on this jury. Where's Tylee? And JJ, okay, they said he has autism, had autism, Lori said. Maybe he can't testify. Maybe he's nonverbal. But I wonder where he's at. And Alex died. They said Alex died 6 months to the day. I'm sure they're just kind of trying to put all these names together. And Trina, her whole thing is she has to convince them beyond a reasonable doubt. Reasonable doubt. You don't have to know. A lot of times we get confused. Beyond a shadow of a doubt, meaning we know for certain it happened. It's beyond a reasonable doubt. Like, okay, within reasonable, yes, it makes sense. That she has to convince them with her evidence and with her witnesses that Lori conspired with Alex to kill Charles. There does not have to be a written agreement. There does not have to be the specific words, let's kill Charles, shoot him. There does not have to be slam dunk recordings of the two of them talking about it. There just has to be words. There has to be plans. There has to be something. And she went through the fact that this was thought of the day before, well, a few days before, even months before, really, but really a few days before. And then that morning worked with Alex to say, you must stay close. And then they came up with this plan, premeditated. They had planned it to kill her husband at the time, Charles Vallow. That's what the jury has to determine. Did they present enough witness and evidence? This closing argument from Trina and the closing arguments from Lori is not evidence. They cannot consider this as evidence. In a minute, I'll play some clips of Lori. She tried to testify. can't testify in the closing arguments. This is a synopsis bringing it all home to the jurors to help them realize, okay, this was the case. We posted the entire closing arguments for Trina K, for Lori, for the whole thing, the rebuttal too. You can go watch them. Here is how Trina K, on our YouTube, by the way, here is how Trina K ended her closing argument.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have talked about the evidence in this case. Evidence that was presented to you through witnesses who took the stand and exhibits that were admitted for you to review. Remember the evidence of Lori Vallow's motive. Charles's life insurance, Chad Daybell. Remember Lori Vallow's own words of wanting to get rid of Charles, of drugging him, her acceptance of her brother's statements that he wanted to kill Charles, how she used Melanie and Summer to plan her mission and ensure that Charles didn't have help from Brandon or Zach or Adam. Her words to Alex about it all coming to a head, that he had to stay near her and they would be like Nephi, justified in killing Charles. And finally, her words to Chad Daybell on July 18th, confessing to the killing when she said Charles had changed the life insurance before we got rid of him. Look at her actions and demeanor, having her brother come over on the 10th to her house with a loaded .45 caliber handgun, creating the one and only reason why Charles stayed inside the house, why he didn't just take JJ to school. The 12 minutes that Charles is at the house before Lori leaves in the car, the 47 minutes after that before they call 911, her demeanor when she comes back, not caring that anyone has been hurt, her demeanor on the body-worn camera, during her interview, what you heard about during the drive. Think about her credibility, how she cried for you in her opening statement. You certainly didn't see her cry on that body camera footage. You didn't hear about her crying as she was being driven to the Family Advocacy Center, and you did not see her cry in her interview. Finally, think about the physical evidence that proves that Lori and Alex staged this scene, that Charles was never in possession of that bat when he was shot by Alex or either of the shots, that instead he was executed that day for this defendant's benefit. The physical evidence disproves beyond a reasonable doubt that Lori Vallow and Alex Cox were justified under the law in killing Charles. The jury instructions tell you to use reason, common sense, and experience. Charles Vallow is dead today because this defendant and her brother Alex Cox conspired to kill him. They planned it out, and they had their weapons, and they orchestrated a way to ensure that Charles was back in the house where he was shot and killed for money and Chad Daybell. The evidence proves to you that Lori Vallow Daybell is guilty of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder, and the state asks you to hold her accountable and find her guilty. Thank you.
Okay, that was the end of Trina's closing argument. I say the end. I played you like 4 minutes total, and again, there's a lot there. So go back, listen, give me your thoughts. After that, there was a break. The judge told her we got to take a stretch break for 15 minutes, and then it was Lori Vallow Daybell's turn. I'd love to know your thoughts, by the way, on both of these closing arguments. I'll read some in a little bit, or share some of the expression that we heard at the courthouse after the fact, after it happened. But Lori Vallow Daybell was ready to talk, ready to share her closing argument after the break. Here is how she began.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the state of Arizona has the 100% burden of proving that I committed a crime, a grievous crime, conspiracy to commit premeditated murder of my husband, Charles Vallow. The state has the burden of proving to you that this event was not self-defense. In your jury instruction under the instruction, use of force and crime prevention, the last line reads, if the state fails to carry this burden, then you must find the defendant not guilty. In the law, under your jury instruction titled Justification for Defense of a Third Party, the last line reads, if the state fails to carry this burden, you must find the defendant not guilty. Under your jury instruction titled Justification for Self-Defense, the last line reads, if the state fails to carry this burden, you must find the defendant not guilty. In your jury instruction, under presumption of innocence, it states, the law does not require the defendant to prove innocence. Every defendant is presumed by law to be innocent. Under the burden of proof, it explains that the state's burden is this. Proof beyond a reasonable doubt is proof that leaves you firmly convinced of the defendant's guilt. If, on the other hand, you think there's a real possibility that he is not guilty, you must give him the benefit of the doubt and find him not guilty.
Lori went on to talk about that the state did not prove that she said, her words, here's what we learned in this trial. We learned this, we learned that, we learned this, we learned that. She talked about some of the exhibits that were shown, some of the evidence that was shown. She didn't talk about the text messages. Again, she could not testify. She could only speak to the evidence and the witnesses that were there in court. And here's a little bit more of what she said.
We learned in this trial that my daughter Tylee and I were also taken to Chandler Police Department in a police van. We heard from Detective Inkland's testimony that her goal was to make small talk with us. And
The jury will determine what the testimony did or did not show. Go ahead.
that her goal was to make the small talk with us and all the way to the station so she could speak with us separately before we would talk about what actually happened. We learned that all three of us were separated and taken to 3 interview rooms where we each told police of the events of the day, each from our own perspectives, and answered all questions asked of us. We saw snippets of that interview in the trial here. The state did not show you the entire interview. Most of my police interview is admitted, though, into evidence in this exhibit. It's number 286. And I would encourage you to watch that entire interview when you start your deliberations. It is important. It is important for you to determine for yourselves my demeanor and not listen to anyone else. You can see it with your own eyes and hear it with your own ears. We heard from several witnesses that because this event was almost 6 years ago, that their memories of the events and statements were probably better back then. Well, my police interview happened that very morning, and I told the police the events from my perspective at that time. It is admitted into evidence and will answer many of your questions. You did not see Tylee's interview, but we did learn from Detective Inkland that she did an interview that morning as well. You did not see Alex's interview, but we learned that Alex was interviewed that morning by Detective Moffett, the original case agent, whom we did not hear from in this trial. The state chose not to show you those interviews or let you listen to the 911 call.
The jury shall disregard that last statement. Okay, the jury can only consider what was admitted into evidence.
We learned in this trial from Officer Kautheim's testimony that Alex was injured on the back of his head with a bump and, according to his testimony, a 1-inch laceration. We did not see those pictures documenting that injury as well. We learned in this trial that we did not know, the 3 of us, that our interviews were being recorded.
Lori went on to blame the police in a way that they didn't document that when Alex did the walkthrough of the house with the detectives that the body camera was not working. I wish it would have been working. That would have been awesome to see. And she got really fired up about Nephi. And Trina K talked about this several times on during her closing argument about Nephi and the fact that Lori wanted to be like Nephi, and the Nephi, of course, was a prophet in the Book of Mormon. Adam testified of this. We've talked about it in the past. He was commanded by the Spirit, by God, to kill a wicked man, and he did that. And Lori had compared herself and Alex to Nephi. And here, Lori seemed to, in my opinion, the most passionate, talking about Nephi, and the prosecution bringing Nephi into this trial. Here's what she said.
A 2-minute period changed our lives forever. How are you supposed to choose between 3 people you love? Your husband, your daughter, your brother?
All right, hold on. All right, I'll caution the defendant not to testify about things that were not entered into evidence.
How can you decide for another person if they feel threatened? Why does the state want to blame to someone?
It's a reasonable person standard, not the standard of the person.
I'm sure you'll point that out in rebuttal. I'll allow the argument as that inference. Go ahead.
Why does the state want to blame someone for this tragic event? What evidence did the state show you in this trial that I wanted harm to come to my husband? We learned in this trial that I was praying for my husband. We learned in this trial that even though my husband and I were having marital issues, that we were both trying to do the best things for our son with special needs, JJ. We learned in this trial that I was shocked that Charles had changed his life insurance policy, but I was not angry as the state alleges. In the phone call we heard from the insurance company, we heard that I was disappointed for our children, our grown children, as well as our children still at home, but I was not angry. My husband Charles was providing for our children still at home. I had no motive to change that. We heard a lot in this trial about the Book of Mormon prophet named Nephi. This is the state's evidence to murder over self-defense, and it is utterly ridiculous. We heard from Detective Duncan, who admitted on the stand that he had no idea what I meant in the text message when I said, "We will be like Nephi." In Mormon culture, Nephi signifies strong faith, perseverance, and courage.
Right. That's sustained.
The state's attempt to misconstrue the positive text message about a wonderful religious figure, Nephi, and try to turn it into an order to kill someone is absurd. This is an attempt by the state to try to retrofit a crime that doesn't exist. This event was not a crime, it was a tragedy. Don't let them turn my family tragedy into a crime. When I'm done speaking to you, the state gets to get up and rebut all that I've told you. They've got to have the last word, so to speak, because it is 100% their burden to prove to you that I committed a crime. And you won't be allowed to hear from me again. So I want you to remember that it is the state's job to prove to you that I committed a crime. And if you have not seen the evidence that leaves you firmly convinced that I have committed this very crime, then the state failed to show you the evidence that you need. Because I did not commit this crime. The only interview the state entered into evidence is mine. So I encourage you to go watch it. I told you just what happened that day, just the way it happened. The state put forth a bunch of evidence in this trial in an effort to make you dislike me, to try to attack my character, so that you would just say guilty no matter what evidence they showed you. But only you get to decide. The state put up witnesses that had zero knowledge of a conspiracy. The state did not show you evidence of an agreement to commit murder. They showed you evidence of a family tragedy, and then they showed you the sad effects of a family torn apart because of that tragedy.
If you remember, that's how Lori began her opening statements 10 days ago, or 2.5 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago today, actually, talking about it was a family tragedy, not a crime. So it's interesting that she really wants them to watch that interview that she did with the police, because she says it will show them for themselves her demeanor. But she didn't take the stand, where she could have written out her questions and answered those questions and cleared a lot of that up. She didn't take the stand because the prosecution would get to question her too. It's interesting that instead she's saying, go listen to that interview. And I think maybe the jury will. I mean, she was asked, and then Trina Kay also said, yeah, go listen to the interview. So after Lori did her closing, again, that was about 14, 15, 16 minutes, Trina Kay got to do a rebuttal. The rebuttal was around 7 minutes. And this is where we saw some fire from Trina Kay. Here's what she said, some of it.
The execution of Charles Vallow is not a family tragedy. There is nothing that you can say about shooting a man as he lay on the ground that you can try to construe in any way to make that a family tragedy. This case is about the defendant, not Alex Cox. Alex is involved in it because that is her co-conspirator. We are not here to determine his guilt, albeit it is quite obvious. This defendant wants you to just look at one piece, and she wants you to hope that there's only a person who will say, I heard the conspiracy. But what did you hear in every instruction is that you can look to other evidence to show that. This defendant wants you to forget about her words and pretend that when she told her lover, her soon-to-be husband, we got rid of him, that he changed the life insurance before we got rid of him, that somehow means what? That they killed him. And he changed his life insurance before they killed him. What does that tell you? That tells you motive, and that tells you who did it. This defendant is one of those we, because she's writing it. She wants you to pretend that when she is talking about Charles for months, acquiescing and agreeing to her brother killing him, having people tell her that it's wrong, having people know that they're planning for something, that those words don't mean exactly what they are. We got rid of him, this defendant. The state, of course, has the burden, and that's how it should be. But every one of those justification defenses falls short when you look at the conspiracy itself. When they got rid of him, they did it by planning it. There is no reason that Alex Cox came over to this defendant's house with a loaded gun and waited for Charles to come inside, held there by this defendant using the cell phone. That is conspiracy. That is planning. That is premeditated.
I think a lot of people were impressed more with the rebuttal in a way than the closing. I'll be after the fact, spoke with several people that watched, and they felt that they wished for more passion. And I spoke with some prosecutors too, not here, who say it's always hard to do that closing argument because how much do you put in? The other day I interviewed Alan Browning. He said 40 minutes is a good time. And I think I would agree with that. We have short attention spans nowadays. And there were some people in the gallery that were nodding off, not jurors that I could see. But some people in the gallery were kind of nodding off during that because it was a little long. But that rebuttal, that's a lot of what the jurors will remember. And after that, the judge said, we're going to do a very scientific way of determining who is the alternates. And they pulled two numbers out, two men who left. Juror 5 and juror, what was the other number? I have it on my tweets. I think it was 14. So those two jurors, they're still on standby, but they're not deliberating. And the judge said, the schedule is up to you. My court staff, he swore them in to protect the jurors, to make them say that, if anything happens, that the judge, will be alerted. If they have questions, they can write them down and they will be given to the judge. And we did have a couple of questions in Chad's trial back in Idaho. I remember that. They were brought into them. And it was how it could be. Now it's basically up to the jury. So they took the jurors out. And within 10 minutes, the jurors said, we're coming back tomorrow. We're going home. So what does that mean? Well, there's a bunch of theories out there. I don't know. One, did they say, let's start fresh tomorrow? Everybody go home, get some sleep. We'll just go at it tomorrow. Did they try to start deliberating and appoint a foreman and say, let's do it tomorrow? Did they want to come back and watch the video that Lori really wants them to watch? I don't know what it means. I don't think they got into deliberating very much. So they'll be back tomorrow at 10:30 and we'll be on verdict watch. We'll be down at the courthouse waiting. When the verdict is in, we will get at least a 30-minute heads up. I will put it on my X. I'll try to put it on YouTube for those of you watching on YouTube. That can be hard if I'm inside the courthouse. I can't do a video inside the courthouse. So you'll just have to go to, or my Facebook, Nate Eaton Reporter. We'll put it on there so that you can watch the verdict almost live. The judge says we can have it delayed 5 minutes. So instead of 30 minutes, it will be delayed 5 minutes. But there won't be any court proceedings or anything tomorrow until we have a verdict. If we don't get a verdict tomorrow, then the next day they'll be back at it deliberating. If Thursday, Friday comes and they can't reach a decision, then they can probably write a note to the judge and say, we can't reach a decision. We're a hung jury, which has happened before. Not in this case, but in other cases. And then the judge will decide what to do from there. A lot of times he'll encourage them to go back and try to come up with some sort of solution. So that is how the day went. Again, we have all of the testimony, the arguments on our YouTube. You can watch the whole thing. A woman named April came up to me and told me before I walked into court today that she knew Charles and Lori and Tylee from church years ago, and showed me some beautiful photos of Tylee saying how much she loved her mom on social media, on Instagram, of her posting family pictures with Colby and Charles and whatnot. And so I grabbed April after the hearing today just to get her thoughts about seeing Lori again and being in the courtroom, and how this is such a different picture from years ago when they all were in church together. Here's what April told me. Why did you come out to court today?
I knew the Vallow family personally, so I just came to support Charles.
And tell me about your interactions with them back when you knew them.
Okay, I'm in Gilbert, Chandler area, and I knew them right before they moved to Mesa, and I knew them pretty well. My daughter is Tylee's age, and we went to church together. They were in our ward, and we were pretty close.
Yeah, tell me about what type of girl Tylee was.
Tylee was like any other teenager, but she loved her mom so much. She actually really doted over her, and so did Charles. Charles always talked about his wife, how lucky he was, and JJ, and they were a really good family.
You were telling me earlier that Tylee really praised her family on Instagram, like publicly. It seemed like they were a really close family.
Yeah, she would say, someday I want to be like a mom like my mom is, and she'd say like, my mom's better than your mom, you know, that she was very, very close to her mom.
So what have you thought over the past few years as this has all come out?
I just can't imagine the last moments of Tylee, how betrayed she must have felt by her mom loving someone and looking up to someone so much, and just all this happening to her.
What was it like sitting in the courtroom today hearing Lori, the woman that you used to go to church with?
Yeah, she's a manipulator. She's good at it.
Yeah. Well, when do you think we'll have a verdict? Any prediction?
I'm hoping they'll have a verdict tomorrow. I don't know, it's kind of heartbreaking that the jury doesn't know the full story. You know, this is just an isolated incident to them, and Lori knows how to put on a show. So I hope that, you know, justice is served.
Anything you want to add?
I just love you guys. I love Kay. I love you all, and I support you.
Very good. Thank you to April for chatting with me. One of the things that was mentioned kind of outside of the presence of the jury today is the judge asked the prosecutor if they plan to present aggravators for sentencing, assuming Lori is found guilty. And Trina Kay said yes. What that means is that you can present witnesses or you can just argue that, at least this is my understanding, and I don't quite understand how everything works in Arizona court, but from my brief research this afternoon and consulting with a few people, if she's found guilty, then the state will argue what they believe the punishment should be. And Trina Kay, it sounds like, will argue that there were aggravating factors in this crime, and because of that, she likely will argue for life in prison. Sometimes the state might argue just a normal punishment. And it sounds like the judge, maybe she could call witnesses. So many of you have messaged me about that. I'm going to do a little bit more research into that, what all that means. But I know that came up today, and that was interesting. In Idaho, we heard there was the whole penalty phase in Chad's case because he got the death penalty. In the death penalty phase, the prosecution can call witnesses and the defense can call witnesses. One argues that he should get death. One argues that he should not. Chad didn't present any mitigation in his defense for that portion of his trial. But the prosecution had several people go up on the stand and they read their victim impact statements. And that could be what happens when Lori is sentenced here. It's possible that Brandon could read a victim impact statement. Maybe Kay, very much so Kay, Colby, people, that have been closely affected by it could. A guy who has been closely affected by all of this is Sheriff Ron Ball from Madison County. He was working for the Rexburg Police Department when all of this broke in the detective unit. And now he has since run for sheriff and was elected sheriff. And now he is the county sheriff in Madison County. He happened to come down here today and he decided he was going to come to court with his wife. I caught up with him after. Here are his thoughts. Sheriff, you're here in Arizona. What brought you down here?
Well, I originally come down for some business, some sheriff office related business, and we were here and heard they were going to have closing arguments today, so we decided to stay and watch them.
And what do you think?
I think it's the way I expected it to go. I think that Lori was way outclassed by a prosecutor who was extremely experienced. Lori struggled, and so I think the verdict shouldn't shock anybody. I believe the jury's going to come back with a guilty verdict.
What did it feel like hearing Lori talk? Because you've waited years to hear her talk and say something. What was it like?
It's the same old Lori. It's the same Lori I met with 6 years ago. And Lori just wants to dictate what she wants everybody to hear. And I was surprised by her comments in court and trying to put blame elsewhere. She's done that the whole time.
Were you surprised she didn't take the stand?
No. I wasn't surprised that she didn't take the stand because she'd get put in a corner by the prosecutor here. And she can't have that, because then, you know, everybody will know that she's lying, because she can't answer questions that Trina would put to her. So I'm not that surprised that she didn't take the stand. I wish she would have, but I'm not surprised that she didn't.
Kind of wild looking back, knowing it's been 5-6 years, and you're here, and Nate Duncan's here, and these guys that you didn't know 6 years ago, things are finally kind of wrapping up.
Yeah, it has been quite a trip for, I think, all the investigators involved. Everybody from Idaho, Utah, clear down to Arizona. We've all developed relationships with each other, and we continue to have those relationships. We text each other, we talk to each other, and I mean, we all share something that's kind of unique, that's probably not shared by law enforcement too often. Just a large group of guys come together for one great goal, and to get that conviction, you know, it keeps this group tight, and we've made a friendship, and I think we'll have that friendship for a long time going forward.
What's it like when you show up here and there's 100 people trying to get in the courtroom, and I'm sure when you walk around Rexburg, do people want to talk to you about this case?
Yeah, I mean, and I don't mind talking about it. Yeah, now that the trial's all over in Idaho, we can, myself and the other officers that were involved, we can open up and talk about this case. When I get here and I see the courtroom filled, or all these people out in the hallway, I think one hand, you kind of appreciate everybody's interest in it, and then on the other hand, I'm like, why? You know, why give her the satisfaction of having everybody just so involved in this? I think that's what she wants. She likes that. She likes the notoriety, I believe. You know, she's, but it's, you know, it's coming to an end, and that'll be nice to have for everybody, especially the victims in this case, the victims and the officers who spent so much of their lives, you know, seeking justice. So it'd be nice to have over.
Anything you want to add?
No, I think Nate Eaton owes me lunch at one point in some time.
To say that we're gonna go have lunch. Oops, I meant to cut that out. I probably do owe him lunch, so we'll have to have lunch when this is all over. Maybe we should do a big dinner for all the investigators, and we'll live stream it. You all can come. Something like that. I don't know. Once everything's done, we'd have to meet in the middle of, I don't know, Utah, St. George, somewhere between Rexburg and Phoenix, Chandler. Before we go tonight, we have to remember Charles Vallow, hopefully one step closer to justice for him. Charles Vallow, we've seen a lot, heard a lot about him over the past few weeks, the good things, the horrible way in which he died. Makes you wonder, you know, what he'd be doing today if he was here on the earth with his children. And we think about him today, and we want to take a moment to remember Charles Vallow. Well, I want to thank you all for watching. We do have a lot of questions and some shout outs. Before I get to that, I want to show you some photos that you all sent. And I love these. I'm going to view these as a gallery. And I think I can take them full here. Hold on one moment. Maybe I can't. Here we go. Let me pull this in full. Sorry. We have you guys with your mugshot shirts. I mentioned this a gallery. Let me pull them up one at a time, I guess. I want to thank you all for supporting East Idaho News every day, watching the trial on our channel, and I'm just going to do it this way. We've got her. We've got this one. She has the Ain't Nobody Got Crime for That shirt. We have the mugshot shirt, which is great. We have this mugshot shirt. We have Ain't Nobody Got Crime for That. We have good old Chad here, who came up from Utah. There he is, posing by the Arizona sign with his mugshot shirt. He's come to all three trials, a couple days here and there. We've got this guy, and his name, Baldwin. He is incredibly talented. He sent me a mallet, a judge's mallet that you use, like that, you know, court is now in session, that he made out of wood. It's in my office in Idaho. I did think maybe we should start and end Courtroom Insider with that. Hit the mallet in the beginning and the end, but then I didn't want to travel with it in case it got damaged or something. We have these two wonderful ladies wearing their mugshot shirts, and we have this one, guilty of following East Idaho News. And my apologies if many of you I know sent in some other shirts too, or other pictures of you in shirts. And you can still get them if you're interested, eastidahonews.com/shop. We can put the link in there. We have to, of course, acknowledge our sponsor, Alan Browning from Browning Law. Had an interview with him the other night. Many of you have watched it and appreciated his insight. You can go check that out. He's a defense attorney in Idaho Falls, who, of course, has some really interesting insights on this particular case and others. So thanks to Browning Law. Also, thanks to Teton Toyota for hooking me up with a Toyota Prius. I got back. I went to Idaho this weekend, got back, and the car was still there waiting for me. And I had to slow my roll again because it's so easy to go fast in that car versus the car I drive at home. So yes, tomorrow, here's what's happening. As I mentioned, we're on verdict watch. So whatever happens, happens. And we wait, we wait and see. That's what we do. Let me go ahead and read you some shout outs. Sheila Wright. I have to shout out Sheila Wright. I knew Sheila Wright and her mother Becky in Chesterfield, Virginia when I was a reporter years ago, and I had no idea her mother Becky passed away a few months ago. Sheila, thinking about you. Becky was always great at calling in news tips to our newsroom, and sometimes I'd see her at different scenes. She would Facebook me and say, hey, you should know about this. But Sheila has been a stalwart East Idaho News follower, and especially with the trial. So Sheila, sending my best to you. Thanks for watching. Elizabeth, shouting out your best friend, Tracy Clark, who's tuning in tonight. Thank you, Tracy and Elizabeth. Adam, shouting out your daughter, who's 16, Sydney, sweet 16. Happy birthday to you. Michael from Pilot Butte, Saskatchewan. I think I said that right, Michael, or Michelle? Michelle? Sorry if I said it wrong. Anna Austin Cruz, fun fact. Oh my gosh, guys, this is crazy. Anna was rushing in the house to watch Courtroom Insider when she tripped over a sprinkler and broke her kneecap and had to go to the hospital, even had surgery. How awful. She's home now. I'm so sorry, Anna, about that. But yeah, gosh, all our best to you. Yes, you are a dedicated fan. Natalie, studying criminology at West Virginia University. Your dad says hello, Leo. Thank you. Danny Riley, Taisha, Ty, I met you the other day. Ty Bond. Taishia, got it right. Kim Rose, Grandma Kim, we know you. Walked into church yesterday for Easter services, and she came over with, she passed over Reese's eggs. Perfect, Kim, thank you. Trish Anderson, Nancy Fish, Eldon Hancock, Noelle Marroquin, Alyssa Smith out of Missoula, Montana, who's been here for every episode of Courtroom Insider. Amazing. Janet from Indiana and her daughter, who oh yes, Janet. I met you. I met Janet. I met your daughter today. She had just come from the doctor. So Janet, hi to you. Thank you for watching. And Air Mac from Greece. Amazing. Greece, Ireland, Spanish Fork, Utah, Pocatello, Idaho, Finland, and Kodiak, Alaska. Awesome. Thank you all so much for watching. We got a couple questions here. Natalie, does the jury go home or are they sequestered somewhere? Nope, they went home. They're at home right now, having dinner with their families. They'll be back tomorrow at 10:30. They won't sequester them, and we'll see what their families have to say. Nate, will you be interviewing the jurors? Yes, I would love to do that, and I hope to interview them. From what I've heard, tomorrow, if they have a verdict tomorrow, that they may be asked, do you want to talk to the media? And then they'll bring them outside to a media staging point, and then they can talk there. So we'll see. I'd love to do some one-on-one interviews too. That would be awesome too. If any of you know the jurors, and I'll try to track them down too when we're done. Kathy and David says, given that Kathy and David, those are my in-laws my in-laws, shout out to them, Kathy and David. I don't think this is them asking the question because they say, we're rather new to this case. Did the pool party get brought up? No, not in the trial. Wait, yes. One witness did. I don't remember who, but they said they recall hearing something about a pool party. One of the police officers. That was the extent of it, though. So it did come up. If the video interview is for appellate purposes, how can the jury listen to it? The video was admitted into evidence by the prosecutor. And it sounds like Lori specifically noted for appellate purposes on the record that they wanted that portion to be reviewed by the appellate attorneys and then just to be flagged. So that's what she said when I want it noted for appellate purposes that should be looked at. Lori Vallow isn't wearing makeup, jewelry, or nail polish. She is wearing a hairband as a wedding ring and prison-issued glasses. I wonder if the jurors would notice. Tell us about it, Nate. Well, you notice what I noticed. She does have that hairband on her finger is her ring finger. And I don't know if they'll know that it's jail-issued glasses, but I think that they will realize that maybe something. I mean, maybe they don't know she's in jail because she's always sitting at the table when they're brought in, and they leave before she leaves. She goes out a separate secure door, and there's a deputy sitting near her. So I don't know what the extent of their knowledge is, but that I'm sure that they've thought about that perhaps. Will the verdict be on a 30-minute delay? No, 5 minutes. Woohoo! Someone whispered no in the video feed when Juror 5 was released. Can you tell us why? Juror 5, I don't know who whispered no. That's crazy that the mics are picking these things up. There were a lot of people who sighed when Juror 5 was released. Juror 5 is an older man, beard, took a lot of notes, really into it, and he was released. So I think that's why. I think a lot of people really, I don't know, felt a bond to that juror. They could tell he was really paying attention. Jamie W., was there any reaction from Lori during the closing by Trina? Full disclosure, I couldn't quite see Lori. I was seated directly behind her, and there were 4 rows of people in front of me, but I did kind of look. She was taking notes. I'm sure she was nodding her head like this. She has a tendency to do that. I don't know the extent, though, of her disagreement. Brandon asks, will Colby or Charles' son, Cole and Zach, be able to give victim impact statements if Lori is found guilty? Yes, they should be able to. The Cole and Zach have not come, but they should be able to give a statement if they want, or they can write it and have it read or not read. It can just go straight to the judge. What time will the jury be back tomorrow? 10:30. Nate, tell us about your hair gel. What happened this morning? Well, if you must know, I told the story this morning on my video, which I've been doing these informal videos on the way to court, and many of you watch. It seems like we have a different audience, or maybe not. I'm quite enjoying it because it's more in real time, very casual. Maybe after the trial, we'll keep it up. I can drive with you on my way to work. This morning, because I went to Idaho and mixed up in luggage and whatnot, I didn't have any hair gel. So I went down to the hotel lobby. It was early, 6 o'clock. They didn't have any in the store in the hotel, but there's a CVS around the corner. So I go over to CVS in a hurry because I got to get to court. I walk inside, I find the aisle. There's like all this hair gel for $10, and I need like $1 hair gel. I finally get a little tube. It's in the bathroom. A little tube for $3. I go up and check out, and before I'm even thinking, I squirt the gel in my hand at the cash register. I'm self-checkout. I rub it in my hair, and then my hands are filthy sticky. So I say to the employee, do you have a restroom? She says, no, we don't. And I'm thinking, I know you have a bathroom. You just don't let customers use it. So I said, my hands are really sticky. Do you have a sink? She goes, okay. So she types a code in, opens the door, and sure enough, there's 2 bathrooms. But she says, I can't use the bathrooms. I got to use the drinking fountain. So I hit the drinking fountain button, and the water shoots up like 4 feet. Good thing if I had leaned in to get a drink, I would have been drenched. So I'm washing my hands over the drinking fountain, and I get it off. And then I said, do you have a paper towel? And she says, over there. So I have to go get the paper towel. That's the story of the hair gel. The story really is that I'm so forgetful because on Lori's day, on sentencing day in Rexburg, I forgot a belt and socks. I had to stop by Walmart on the way. Amy says they can't use the closing argument as evidence, can they? No, they can't. Just kind of a synopsis of everything. I was quite concerned that Trina mixed up people's names. Thoughts? Perhaps. I mean, full disclosure, I as you can tell, I mix up names all the time. But I don't know. I think that people will forgive that. But yeah, it might be concerning. It might cause some confusion. Thank you so much for bringing us the trial live, Diane. Courtroom Insider every night and all your hard work. I have a question about deliberations. When Trina K and the officer read Lori and Chad's text, they skimmed over the texts. But will the jury have access to all the texts between them or only the ones that were read in court? Great question. If all of them were admitted, and I believe they were in many cases, yes, they'll have access to all of them. If they just admitted portions, which some of the cases I think they did, they'll just have those portions. But I think in most cases, the text messages, all of them were admitted. They just didn't take time in the trial to read through each and every one. But yeah, that's a great question. Someone asked about Charles' two children being in the courtroom. No, they have not come at all. Eldon says in court today, did anyone in support of Lori take seats behind her? Summer, Janice, Barry, or anyone? Does she have anyone there? No, they have not come at all. In fact, they were on the witness list, so they couldn't even watch. They were on Lori's witness list. There were people seated behind the defense in the rows today, but those were mainly members of the public. Barbara asks, are Chad and Lori still Mormon, or have they been excommunicated? Has the LDS Church ever spoken about either of them? The church has not, as far as I know, ever issued a statement about this. Chad has been excommunicated. Lori, I don't know. I have seen Chad's excommunication letter, and he has been excommunicated. Lori, I don't think it ever happened. And the church does not officially comment on membership statuses of members. So I think Lori kind of hopped congregation to congregation, and but I could be completely wrong. She could no longer be a member. They could have excommunicated for her, given the charges that she faced and was found guilty of. It would be completely justifiable for the church to excommunicate her. When Lori isn't playing lawyer Barbie, is she a regular prisoner? Does she have special privileges to prepare for court? Is she allowed to have visitors, or is she in a death row sitting while she's in Arizona? She's not on death row. She's not allowed visitors. All visitors are done through the tablet video. She does not have special privileges. She, in fact, complained the other day that she has to get up at 3 a.m. to get on the bus to go over to the court, and that's when she reviews her stuff. She can review some things in her cell, but no, I don't think she has very many special privileges, other than privileges that other inmates might have when they're on trial, but most of them have an attorney doing the work for them. Has it ever been definitely determined that Lori had a $2 million life insurance policy? No, just from what she has said in court. We haven't ever seen any proof of that. And then a lot of you were asking if she still has it. If the premium's not paid, which I doubt it's been paid for several years, it is canceled. Nate, can you please interview Nancy Jo Hancock, Summer Shiflett, and the other people who have been mentioned? I feel that they can tie up a bunch of loose ends. I would love to interview them all. I've requested interviews with Nancy Jo and with Summer, with Trina K. I did get a note back that because there's the upcoming trial with Brandon, that Trina K won't be doing interviews now. I feel that'll be the same with the police. And even I reached out to Lori's defense team, her advisory attorneys, and I've reached out to Lori too, asking if they will do interviews. I have not heard back, but I'm hoping to get some this week. What point did Chad and Lori lose their independence and have to live in jail every day? Was this after they went to trial? Were they actually able to live in Idaho in the same house until a trial date was set and then sent to jail upon being guilty? No. This is from Tracy. Lori was arrested in February of 2020. She has not had one day of freedom since that day. She was flown back to Idaho, where she lived in the Madison County Jail for years before her trial. During her trial, she was moved to the Ada County Jail. After that trial, she was moved back to the Madison County Jail until she was sentenced, when she was moved to the prison. When she was in prison 4 or 5 months, she was moved to the Maricopa County Jail, where she has been and will be until this trial and Brandon's trial is over, and then she will go back to Idaho to prison. She has not had a day of freedom since February of 2020. Chad was arrested in June of 2020. He hasn't had as many moves, really just one. He was in the Fremont County Jail for years until his trial, when he was moved to the Ada County Jail, and then he was sentenced to death row, and he immediately moved to the prison in Boise, where he will live until he dies, which will probably be at least 10 years, maybe 20 or 30. Unless he dies of natural causes before then. So they were not free. Chad was free for March, April, May, about 3 or 4 months when Lori was in jail, and they talked every day for hours, and we heard some of that in the trials in Idaho. So he did have freedoms that Lori did not have, but they haven't had freedom since